destructive and degrading. The destructive friend is not a real friend. Despite his wit and flattery and the fleeting pleasure of his company, and in the words of Orchos Tzadikim, quickly disassociate from him. When I was a yeshiva student, the Gera Rebbes at Tzal frequently inquired who my friends were and repeatedly warned me not to make sure that I have good friends. The huge impact that a friend has is the core of the Sfas Emes's explanation of this Mishnah. Make yourself a Rav, acquire yourself a friend. The simple explanation is that one needs to expend greater effort to acquire a friend than for submitting to the authority of a Rav, because he can gain and grow much more from a friend than from a Rav. The Magan Avot by Rashbatz provides an acute insight on the religious meaning of friendship. And acquire yourself a friend. The reason for this cautionary advice is because the one needs friends in order to fulfill the Torah. As it says in Pirkei de Rav Nosson, one transgresses a commandment and has another to warn him. Then it says, two are better than one, for should they fall, one can lift the other. It also states that two sitting together for the divine presence is between them. And further in Avodah Zorah 16b says, between me and from you, this teaching will be clarified. And further it says in Tainus, friendship or death. A person needs someone who loves him, whom he can trust and take his advice and accept his rebuke, should his inclination lead him astray to sin. Therefore, he has to acquire him and make every effort until he obtains him. And this is from the commentary to Pirkei Avot.
Okay, I want to ask you a question. How can a friend be seen as more valuable by the Torah than your rabbi, whom you meant to give? It says if you're going to see your physical father drowning, your spiritual, you've got to save. Where's that noise coming from, Gavin? Is it on your side?
It could be. Just put me on mute.
Okay.
Let's just go back. The simple explanation is that one needs to expend greater effort to acquire a friend than for submitting to the authority of a Rav, because he can gain and grow much more from a friend than from a Rav.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
Grow, maybe, not. Is it saying that it's more important?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Look, I personally get... I seem to, in certain ways, get much more emotionally fulfilled from friendship than I am from learning from a rabbi, although it shouldn't be like that. All right, so guys, let me just go through a couple of concepts from that Gavin lost audio yesterday, just in the latter part of the share. So I just want to go through one or two concepts. And that is fairly that we were on the 78th daf. And we learned that generally, except for the verse regarding theft, there is an exclusionary term when you see the Binyan Av model with regards to the or. It generally excludes a hybrid, not in all cases, but regarding consuming the animal as well as consecrations for sure. So we're saying that if that is the case, and it doesn't come to teach to exclude a hybrid from the fourfold or fivefold payment, because you look at the context of the verse. What did Bava Kamma and teach this Binyan Av for? I mean, it doesn't look like we need it, because when we're looking at the actual passuks themselves, they seem relatively clear. So we're saying, listen, he must have that principle for a certain reason. So in other words, when Rava says this establishes a model that teaches that whenever the term se is stated, it is meant only to exclude a hybrid. For what purpose of this law was taught? Because also it might confuse you, because before Rava said you got to look at the verse. There's no such thing as when you read the word se. Well, when you read the word or, he was specifying that it doesn't mean necessarily to include or exclude a hybrid. So now we're learning that generally when you read the word, it excludes a hybrid. So you've got to define the difference between the word se and the word or. So the word or what happens is it comes to teach you the opposite of the logical deduction of whether animals can breed. And if they can, it means there's a hybrid, then it all comes to exclude a hybrid. And when the animals can't breed, you think you're going to exclude a hybrid, and the word or is coming to teach you to include a hybrid. So what I'm saying is the word or has to be pasuk related, where you're getting the concept of the opposite to the logical deduction. That's what it's coming to teach you. Otherwise, you could just use your logic. But the word se is generally a term that excludes a hybrid. And how do we know this? Because we had two verses. The one said a se to lambs and a se to goats, which meant an offspring of lambs and an offspring of goats. It used the plural. Remember, I shared that with you guys. And then it also used the se in another particular context, which showed that it didn't include a hybrid. So if you can read it from the pasuk, the Gemara is asking, what do you need Rava's binyan av for? And Arthur, what is a binyan av?
I don't actually know. I mean, I know that.
Is it? It's got something to do with the first primary source. Sorry, Arthur, go ahead.
Yeah.
Primary source, or because when you say binyan in the Hebrew language, it talks about the verbs, so the classic, or is it the primary source?
Yeah, so Kevin latched onto the idea very well, is that a binyan av is exactly that. It's the primary source for a rule. So if you've got a verse, or you've got two verses, you get the primary source of the concept that you can apply to many verses. So, for example, the permission to prepare food on Yom Tov only was stated in regards to the Chumash with Pesach. That's all. But we apply this rule to similar days where you've got the three regalim, the three festivals, Sukkot, Shavuot, etc. So you take the actual principle and you apply it to other cases, exactly as Kevin was saying. If you look at Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 15, you know, guys, it specifies that the testimony of one witness is inadmissible. So the binyan av means that any place in the Torah that it says the word witness singular, without such specification, it's obviously going to refer to where the testimony in general requires two witnesses. So that's another example of a binyan av. Okay, and so what we're doing here is we're looking at the binyan av of where that principle is applied. Do we apply it generally to consecrations? What do we need it for? So the established binyan av, or the established model, teaches us that whenever the term se, now we're not talking about the word or, where it's context related. The word se is stated, it's only meant to exclude a hybrid. Why? Because you say a se of lambs, a se of goats, which means a thoroughbred offspring. So why are we being taught that law? It's obvious when you look at the pasuk. So the Gemara says, if you would suggest that it was taught in order to disqualify a hybrid as an offering, it's already explicitly written in the verse regarding offerings, because it says an ox or a lamb. Now, when you read the word an ox or a lamb, do you need to know that it excludes a hybrid? Yes or no, guys? Guys?
Yes, no.
Well, which is it and why?
You don't have to, because the ox and the lamb can't produce a hybrid.
Exactly. Well done.
Yeah.
Well done, Yeshakach. That's exactly it. So the logic there, you know to exclude a hybrid, because a hybrid cannot come from an animal with two different gestation periods. And if you would suggest that Rava's binyan av was taught in order to disqualify a hybrid as a Maisa offering, because we're saying maybe Maisa isn't a classical offering in the standard terms. It's like what we see now at Tzedakah. So where do we get that? So we're saying, well, it's not true, because the laws of Maisa offering are derived from the laws of standard offerings through a Gezerah Shava using the word tachas. So let me explain to you what I mean. Is that when you look at Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 27, and we look at verse 32 to 33, the commands of the tithing of one's newborn cattle, sheep, and goats work as follows. The animals are gathered in a pen, and there's an opening large enough for one animal at a time to exit, right? So the owner counts the animals as they leave the pen, and he marks every 10th one with a red dye wire, declaring this one is Misa. So the tithed animals are then brought to the temple in Jerusalem to be offered as sacrifices, and their meat being eaten by the owner and his guests. So, although in that pasuk the term "seh" isn't used, which is what Kevin asked yesterday, he said, hang on, this one thing, I don't see the word "seh" written. So, Kevin, that was well observed yesterday. You're observant about being observant, as Kevin would say. So he noticed that, and it was good because there was no "seh" written. He said, how do you know? So, Kevin, it's such a good question. The Gemara asked it, is that you don't need it because it's using the term, it's using the term flocks, son, because there's a Gezerah Shava comparing the context of the animal's tithes and other offerings through the word tachas, okay? And therefore it's in both passages, so you don't need the word "seh," because what happens is the word goes tachas. Do you know what tachas means?
Under.
Yes. So whatever passes under the staff of the animal owner, the 10th one shall be holy, and it appears in the passage of offerings also, Kevin. It says it shall remain tachas under its mother, in other words, under its mother's care, for 7 days. Okay, so that establishes a Gezerah Shava that teaches us that all the laws which apply to offerings apply to the animal tithe as well. So we already know that through the Gezerah Shava that a hybrid, which is invalid for an offering, is invalid for a Misa offering, not because of the word "seh," but because of the Gezerah with that extra word tachas, which is superfluous, and it links the two verses together because it's mentioned it twice. Okay, so you don't actually need to know it outright. And if you'd suggest that maybe it was taught in order to exclude a hybrid from the Bechora, which is the firstborn, it's a male offspring. It could be a cow, a sheep, a goat. It's given to a Kohen or offers it as a sacrifice. So the word "seh" appears with respect to the Bechor offering in the verse. That actually does have the that actually is in the same chapter 27, but it's in verse 26, not 32 to 33. So it says, but the firstborn, whether an ox or a seh. So you might suggest that Rava's Binyan Av comes to teach the word "seh" with respect to Bechor means to exclude a hybrid. Okay? But you don't need to, because the laws of Bechorah, firstborn, are derived from the laws of the Misa offering, because there's a separate Gezerah Shava. There's the word havara, okay? And what that does is it's basically vahavarta. It comes from the word vahavarta, which is from Shemot chapter 13, verse 12 in Exodus, and it means, and you shall pass. So every first issue of the womb to Hashem, and it states with respect to the animal tithe in that verse in Vayikra, whatever Yavor passes under the staff, the 10th one shall be holy. So that obviously, guys, establishes a Gezerah Shava that teaches that the laws which apply to the animal tithe apply to the Bechorah, the firstborn, as well. So we already know this through the Gezerah Shava, that a hybrid which is excluded from the animal tithe is excluded from Misa, is excluded from Bechorah, and we don't need Rava's Binyan Av to teach us that. Okay? So, because it's written, but the firstborn of an ox, which teaches that an animal isn't subject to Bechorah unless it's an ox and its firstborn is an ox. What do we mean its firstborn is an ox? Why repeat that statement? Because it has to have the appearance of an ox to the exclusion of a mutant. In other words, then is it necessary to teach that a hybrid is not subject to Bechorah? So what the Gemara is saying is, if even an animal that's a full-blooded sheep, for example, it's a full-blooded sheep that looks like a goat is not allowed. Obviously, then a hybrid is not allowed, because if even the appearance is excluded from this, a non-full-blooded hybrid is certainly excluded from the list. Okay, and it's not subject to Bechorah, because if you look at Numbers chapter 18, verse 17, it reads, But the firstborn of an ox or the firstborn of a lamb or the firstborn of a goat, they are holy. So it's mentioning this term firstborn, firstborn, firstborn quite often. All you have to say is the firstborn of an ox, a lamb, or a goat. That other word firstborn means it has to actually look like the parents. Never mind be a thoroughbred. So the three mentions of the word firstborn are superfluous. Okay, so basically we expound them to mean a firstborn ox that is itself an ox. So the first thing is that firstborn second word is used to teach you that it has to be a thoroughbred. The second one is teaching you that it excludes a mutant. And then the other one is saying, obviously, if it excludes a mutant, which is still a thoroughbred, it definitely excludes a hybrid. So that's what the two other firstborn terms are used. Okay? Now, what's it coming to teach? Rather, with respect to what Rava's Binyan Ab stated, with respect to the redemption of a firstborn donkey. So the Torah states in Shemot chapter 13, verse 13, every first issued donkey you shall redeem with the seh. So that is, the owner must redeem the firstborn donkey by giving a seh, either a lamb or a goat, to a kohen. So Rava's Binyan Av teaches that although the term seh is used to include both lambs and goats, it doesn't include a hybrid born from a lamb and a goat. And that's what it's coming to teach us. Okay? So basically, how do we know that? Because if you read the pasuk, if you read the Mishnah, and there's a Mishnah in Bechoros in the 12th daf, and it basically states, one may not redeem a firstborn donkey, neither with a calf, nor with an undomesticated animal, nor with a slaughtered lamb or kid. So what do you mean a slaughtered lamb or kid? Is that once slaughtered, the lamb or goat is no longer considered a seh, it's considered supper. Okay? So that's your first problem. And then when we talk about even a kosher non-domesticated animal, such as a deer or a hart, you can't even use that. Okay? Now, you can't use a treifa, obviously, because it's going to suffer from a fatal defect. So if you can't eat it, you certainly can't redeem it, nor with a hybrid. So in other words, we talk about now a hybrid from two kosher animals, a lamb and a goat. So that establishes a model that whenever the term seh is stated, it means to exclude a hybrid. And also, you can't do it with a koi. Now, when we say you can't redeem a firstborn donkey with a koi, you might say, but surely that fish is worth more than a donkey. Do you know how much people pay for koi fish today? So we're talking about the Hebrew word koi, not the English koi fish. So a koi basically mean it's a hybrid from a domesticated animal and a non-domesticated animal, like a goat and a deer. That's what a koi is. So it's not a koi fish. Okay. So I just thought I'd add that because detail in. So the Gemara asked, but then according to Rav Elazar, who permits redeeming the firstborn donkey with a hybrid, as we learned in the very same Mishnah, why does Rav Elazar permit it? In other words, he says that you can redeem a firstborn donkey with a hybrid for it's a seh. In other words, what he's saying is, since both his father and mother called a seh, you can use a hybrid. Because a seh is referred to whenever they're lambs or goats. So he's saying here, Kevin, you're falling asleep? Just nodded. So he's saying that if a parent is a lamb or a goat, which is referred to as a seh, you can use a hybrid. That's what Rav Elazar says. So then it's saying, according to him, what is the purpose of Rava's Binyan Av later taught? In other words, what was Rava's point for Rav Elazar? The other rabbis agree that you can't use a hybrid. But Rav Elazar that says you can, because a hybrid is actually coming from a seh, and therefore it's included. What did he need Rava's Binyan Av to teach? The Gemara answers Rav Elazar would say to you with respect to what the Binyan Av later articulated by Rava stated, with respect to a non-kosher animal that was born from a kosher animal, impregnated by a non-kosher animal. Do you get that? So it's like something that looks like a horse born from a cow impregnated by a horse, or a pig born from an ewe impregnated by a pig, is deemed non-kosher and may not be eaten. So something should strike you as odd, okay, with the examples there, because, and I'll go through it now. So anyway, it's kosher animal, but one of its parents was not kosher. Obviously, the male aspect. So the Gemara says, Rav Elazar, who derives this law from the binyan av articulated by Rava, does not accord with Rav Yeshua. For according to Rav Yeshua, this law is derived from the plural lambs and goats in the verse. Because what does the verse say? These are the animals that you can eat, an ox, and then it says a set of lambs and a set of goats, which he expounds to teach that an animal may not be eaten unless its father is a lamb and its mother is a lamb. In other words, the very fact that Rav Yeshua uses the plural term, you can see the verse uses the plural term, it proves that it doesn't say a seh of a lamb and goat. It says a seh of lambs, meaning an offspring of 2 lambs, and a seh of goats, an offspring of 2 goats. So we have Rav Yeshua on the one side that says you can't use a hybrid, and Rav Elazar that says you can. So the Gemara asks then, but can a kosher animal conceive from a non-kosher animal? And it's a rhetorical question, because in Bechoros 7a, it establishes that a kosher, non-kosher animal cannot conceive from one another. And we know this, guys. You're not going to get a horse impregnating a cow. They're not confused. It's not human beings. Human beings play around with different same genders or whatever. Animals are more sensible, and species, etc. So you can't have a kosher animal conceived from a non-kosher animal. So we say to Rav Elazar, what do you mean to teach us this rule? You don't need it to teach that rule. There's going to be no hybrid from such an animal. So the Gemara answers, in Rav Yeshua's case, a kosher animal can indeed be conceived from a non-kosher animal, because it can be established for us that Rav Yeshua refers to a kosher animal that conceived from an uncloven hoof.
Damon?
Yeah? Gav? Can you hear me? Gavin?
Yeah, sorry, but I've got, there's Yara run for the guy next door here in the cottage. I have to go collect it. Give me a second. I apologize.
Okay.
Sorry, I apologize.
No problem.
Damon, what's the opinion of that you at the beginning of the discussion? What's his? Can you just repeat it?
Yeah. So the opinion of us as follows: is that we don't know why you want to teach a rule that the word "se" excludes a hybrid, because you only have to look at the pasuk to know that. So when you look at every pasuk, it's going through every pasuk, and it's going through the offerings. It's going through a temple offering, then it's going through Maisa, then it's going through the firstborn. And it says, listen, there's a Gezerah Shava from a normal offering to a Maisa with Tachas to show you that if it's excluding a hybrid in the case of a temple offering, it's using the Gezerah Shava to exclude it in the rule with Maisa offering for every 10th animal. And then it's using a different Gezerah Shava with regards to Maisa and the Bechor, which is the firstborn, and instead of Tachas, it is Ha'avara. It uses that to say if you can't use the, if you have to exclude the hybrid from the verse with regards to Maisa, then you exclude it with regards to the firstborn because of that Gezerah Shava. So we're saying then, what do you need Rava's exposition for? So Rava's exposition has to be with how do you redeem a firstborn donkey? And you need it for there because you could conclude that you in fact can use a hybrid. Because Rav Elazar says you can, but the rabbis are saying, no, you can't. That's what the binyan of is using to teach you. So then it says, well, how does Rav Elazar expound the binyan of? Because he's saying that you can bring the hybrid. Because he says that the hybrid is referred to the appearance as a seh, whether it's a goat or lamb, which means you could bring a combination of both. So he's saying, he's coming to show you a different principle, Rav Elazar, that basically, firstly, he doesn't agree with Rav Yeshua, because Rav Yeshua says that when it says a seh of lambs and a seh of goats, it's mentioning separate categories of lambs and goats, which means it must be a thoroughbred offspring of the lamb and a thoroughbred offspring of the goats. So, but it's saying, according to Rav Elazar, we have to learn that basically we learn that we can't basically have a hybrid of a kosher animal and a non-kosher animal. That's what Rav Elazar is saying. And then the question to Rav Elazar is, but we know in the Gemara they can't have a hybrid. They're not going to breed. So what are you talking about? So that's the question that comes up. So Rav Yeshua refers to a kosher animal that conceived from an uncloven hoofed kosher animal, which is considered non-kosher according to Rabbi Shimon. So in other words, this is the point where they differ. Rabbi Yeshua refers to a non-kosher animal born from a kosher animal impregnated by a non-kosher animal. He wasn't referring to it being impregnated by a non-kosher species, because that isn't going to derive in any sort of offspring. But he's saying it's a kosher species that was born with uncloven hooves, which is prohibited as non-kosher, according to Rabbi Shimon. Okay? So Rabbi Shimon says that the Torah states two scriptural warnings against eating camel meat, one in Leviticus Vayikra chapter 11 verses 4, and one in Deuteronomy chapter 14 verses 7. So one obviously comes to prohibit an actual camel, a genetic camel born from two camels. And the other one comes to prohibit a camel born from two kosher animals, meaning it's genetically a kosher animal, but it resembles a camel. So therefore, that can't be eaten according to Rav Yeshua quotes Rabbi Shimon. As far as Rav Yeshua is concerned, he actually argues with Rabbi Shimon and maintains that an animal born with uncloven hoofs from two kosher animals is actually kosher. So in other words, Rabbi Shimon was on the one side that said, if it doesn't look kosher, it ain't kosher. And Rabbi Yeshua said, if it doesn't look kosher, but is kosher, it is kosher. Okay? So what we are saying is that he still talks about a thoroughbred, Rabbi Yeshua. But it's not the way that Rav Elazar talks about it. Does that make sense? Now, let's just hit on a new topic. Just give me a sec, guys. All right. So, what I was going to say here is we've got, how long have we got? We've got 8 minutes left. Let's just do this last topic. So the Gemara discusses the liability of a thief who stole a consecrated animal for which the owner has responsibility. Okay? What did we say about a person who is responsible for the animal? Guys, do you remember what that meant? I can't hear you.
Yeah, I kind of remember. I just can't get it exact.
Is it?
All right, I'll tell you what, before we deal with this new topic, because we'll do this part tomorrow, as well as the new Mishnah. Do you understand the difference between Rav Elazar and Rav Yeshua and Rabbi Shimon? Or do you guys need clarification on that for the last few minutes?
I've more or less got it, but I can't get it over. So you can. It's quite hectic. So give it back to us. I think Kevin also wouldn't mind. Kevin.
You said who's responsible for the animal?
No, this is what I'm saying. Okay, let's just clear up each case. So we know that the whole exposition, as far as Rava's Binyan Av is concerned, is we can work out with regards to the firstborn, the Maaseh and normal offerings with Gezerah Shabbos, that a hybrid is excluded. It doesn't have to say it outright in the verse. So between the temple offerings And the Maisa, it's got the word tachas. That's the Gezeira Shava, which proves that the hybrid is excluded. In the words, basically with regards to the firstborn and the Maisa, there's the Gezeira Shava Havera, okay, which is also a Gezeira Shava, which means you shall pass. The Havarta, okay? So therefore that tells you that just like with the Maisa offering, a hybrid is excluded, it's also excluded with the firstborn, Bechora, okay? So we don't need it for that. So the Gemara is saying, well, what do you need Rabba's binyan ab for? Because you can see it explicitly. And we only need to say that when you redeem a firstborn donkey, you can't redeem it with a hybrid. That's what the binyan ab is coming to teach you. Okay? Neither with a calf, neither with an undomesticated animal, neither with the koi. So a koi is when you have a domesticated animal and a non-domesticated animal hybrid. You can't redeem it with that either, not just a hybrid of goats and sheep. So all we are saying is, okay, so if you need Rava's binyan av for that, what do we do with the case of Rav Elazar, who actually permits redeeming the firstborn donkey with a hybrid? What does he use the binyan av for? And he basically says that it teaches us that with respect to a non-kosher animal that was born from a kosher animal, impregnated by a non-kosher animal. So he's saying you can use a hybrid of two kosher animals, like a lamb and a goat. Okay, a lamb and a Kabb, you're falling asleep. A lamb and a goat. So Rav Elazar says that hybrid isn't coming to teach you that. What it's coming to teach you, the binyan av bar Rava, is that you can't have a hybrid between a non-kosher animal and a kosher animal. Then the Gemara responds, but they're not going to breed anyway. So what are you talking about? It doesn't make sense. And you must know that Rav Yeshua argues with Rav Elazar. So he's saying that a hybrid's not allowed because it refers to a seh of lambs, meaning the offspring of two lambs, and it uses the word seh separately for a seh of goats, the offspring of two different goats, meaning a thoroughbred of either, but not a mix, not a crossbreed. So Rav Elazar is saying, no, I don't agree with, I might even agree with you there, but what we are learning, well, he doesn't agree with him there because he said a seh refers to a lamb and a goat, even a mixture. It's fine. But he's saying, well, what I learned Rava's binyan av, because I learned that you can't have a hybrid of a kosher and non-kosher animal. So in Bechoros, it says, but they can't breed anyway. What do you mean you learn that? So then we learn this case where Rabbi Yeshua argues with Rabbi Shimon. Because there's a difference between an animal that looks kosher and isn't. So in other words, two kosher animals can breed with each other, but it's a kosher animal that Rav Yeshua refers to that's conceived from an uncloven hoofed kosher animal, which is considered non-kosher according to Rabbi Shimon. So in other words, Rabbi Yeshua is saying, unlike Rabbi Shimon, that if it looks unkosher, but it's still kosher, it's allowed. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi Shimon says it's not kosher if it doesn't look kosher. Do you get what I'm saying? And there him and Rav Elazar agree that disagree, because Rav Elazar says, actually, I would suggest that you can't have it. So he's agreeing with Rabbi Shimon there. So Rav Elazar is agreeing with Rabbi Shimon with regards to the look of a non-kosher animal, even if it's kosher, but he's saying a seh of goats and a seh of lamb and a mixture of them, a hybrid is allowed. Do you get what I'm saying? Guys, can you give it over?
No, you still can't give it over, but I understand.
Partly. You haven't tried?
No, I'm very tired today. You
I'm also very tired. I mean, I went for a run just before the show, but anyway, I'll try to give it over. So I can't give you the Rorov's name, but you can't have a hybrid if one of the animals is a non-kosher animal. Can't be classified as hybrid or accepted. But that's one of the is that Rav Elazar?
So
then the
Gemara is saying, well, he said to The Gemara is saying, but what do you mean? They're not going to breed anyway. They can't breed. So what do you
And-
mean? We don't need to learn that since we know they can't breed. So what they want clarification on Rav Elazar. So what is the clarification given by the Gemara?
That a hybrid can only be between two kosher, between like two lambs or two lambs, not goats, two lambs.
Okay,
Then it's
so
accepted.
I'm gonna do
Isn't
a
it?
chart.
Didn't you say that?
I'm gonna do a chart tomorrow.
But I can add a bit to it, in that if the animal looks doesn't look kosher, but is in fact kosher, then that's fine. Then it's a kosher animal. According to the one rob, according to the other rob, it's not. And sorry, can't add much more.
Yeah, you're right, Kevin. Yes.
No, that's one extra thing. But
Okay, so I think you guys have all done well. What we're going to do is I'm going to do a chart tomorrow to show you where Rav Yeshua differs from Rav Elazar and Rabbi Shimon and where they agree, etc. I'm going to try and have time to do that. And then we're going to
Doesn't it say at the end of this Damon that it's a non-argument and it's actually they move on? Doesn't it say this?
Not